basically, it was a whole decade of struggling through getting to make pieces that started resonating with me.
That's Shikha Joshi, a potter who loves wood-fired pottery.
I thought I'll come back in coffin. I go there and I see all the wood-fired work in Taiwan, and I'm completely rebooted.
In this episode, you will learn how Shikha learned how to push the boundaries of her clay.
What if I do this or this? And the only way I could get the answer was trying it. So, with the result, I learned to push boundaries.
You will also learn how Shikha turned her hobby of pottery into a full-time business.
I had never had the intention of making this. It was never intended as a business. I had wanted to stay home with my kids, be there, and do this as a hobby.
And there's so much more in this episode. I hope you guys enjoy it. See you guys in. Welcome to Shape Your Pottery, and share with me, what is something you believe potters should be doing to have success in pottery?
Well, I guess if you first of all, if you love what you do, that's a big part of the equation. If you really enjoy it, it will work out. I mean, I don't think I started off thinking about making when I was making pots, whether I was going to be successful. I was just hopelessly in love with clay. I was just like, when I started doing clay, I was just in love and it just took off from there. So if you love it, there is no way, it'll happen. It'll work out. So,
Absolutely agree. Shaping Nation, the more you love pottery, the better and more success you'll have in it. I love that. So tell me the story how you got started making pottery.
oh, that's an interesting one. So I grew up in India and I was working in a software company. I'd just graduated, got a job in a software company, and I'd never done art up until then. And I never was interested in art. But I used to, every time I was going to this company, I would cross the street of potters. And in India, you have these street potters who are like, just sitting and making stuff on the road. All the wares are all literally on the road. And so every time I would see someone throwing on the wheel, it was really enticing. So one day, literally on a whim, I just stopped my car and I said, I really need to try this. And again, it was back in the late 90s, and in India, this is not done. Like, I was a girl from a well-to-do family, and I'm all well dressed, and here I'm and it was not studio pottery. It's like really it's really simple, earthenware stuff that they're making on the streets. And so it's not common for people to interact. But I was so desperate to try it. I was like, please, can I try this? And this man looks at me strangely. He's like, what's wrong with her? And I said, I'll give you money, please. And so he said he had a 9-year-old boy. He's like, okay, let's indulge her. And so they had a little wheel, like a wheel on the ground. So I didn't even know how to squat. So somehow I squatted, and this 9-year-old centered clay for me, and I was just playing and making a mess, getting super muddy, and a crowd gathered around us. And typically, I'm very conscious about people watching me now. That day, I was enthralled. I was so enthralled by this feeling of clay slipping through my fingers. I knew I was hooked. So that was my first taste of clay, as I to say. And I looked for classes and all. That was not available. So I luckily got married to my best friend, and we came to the US, and that's where my journey began.
I love that so much. That was such a great story. So can you tell me about the story when you got the opportunity to learn more about pottery at Callenwald Fine Arts Center?
Yeah, so as I said, I got married and I came to the US, and my husband was like, "You work in the computer." This is late 90s. Anyone who knew the sea of computers could get a job back then. And he's like, "We'll get you a job." I'm like, "No, no, no, no. I want to learn how to make pots." And so I looked through Yellow Pages. There was no Google back then. Found this place called Callenwald in Atlanta, and I just went there. And it's a beautiful art center in a very old home, and has a great ceramics program. And this was back in 98. I started my first class in the winter of 98. And I found the most amazing community, not just the teachers, but the community of people around me. There were people I was 22, they were in their 40s and 50s, but they completely embraced me. I fell in love not only with clay, but also America, because they were the people I was just fresh off the boat. I had no idea about America. They not only taught me about clay, but taught me about America, the culture, how to speak, how to be. And I spent 5 happy years learning to make pots, and I had a great access to open studio. So I would just literally go and plant myself there in the morning at 9 and get out when they kicked me out at 5 or something. So every day from 9 to 5, I was there making friends, making pots, and having a great time.
I love that. So, how did this experience help you with developing your own pottery?
I think I think so initially, how we start, we try everything, and when I had this community of people who were always there, coming and working, when I was getting stuck, they were there to help me. I had a amazing teacher. His name was Glenn Dare, who was phenomenal in his. He was an inspiration. I still like even now. Sometimes when I'm making pots, I can hear him in my head, especially when I'm going against what he's told me, and I'm hearing him. He's like, "Shikha, you shouldn't be doing that," or whatever. So I think those 5 years have been very formative in my experience, and it also got me actually so the studio had access to reduction firing, and that's where I got my first experience and addiction of the reduction fired look. And that's, I think, I owe everything to those 5 years of growth that I had in Atlanta. Like that was my foundation. It gave me a very solid foundation to when I moved to Texas in 2003. I was able to bring that with me.
I love that. Shaping Nation, the more you get around other potters and just be around that community, the better your skills are going to grow and the faster you're going to find your voice. I love that. So, we're going to talk more about your pottery in just a little bit. But for now, what is something you learned during this time that you still use today?
Just everything. So my teacher was very he was a minimalist when it came to tools. So all all my like it's like the stuff you learn as a child stays with you. It's almost like that. Everything when I'm throwing, it's his technique. When I'm making, my work is very different from him, completely different from him. He's more of a hand builder with very precise lines. I'm a loose hand builder, but the ideology behind the piece, I think it's literally him talking me through my work.
Tell me more about the ideology of his
I
work.
mean, just okay. It's funny. He was the man who frustrated me the most. I was the slowest learner in my class, so when we started centering, everyone learned, moved on, and 6 months later, I'm still. What is centering? I just couldn't feel it, and every time I would look at him with these eyes, like, "Can you help me?" And he'd be like, smirk and walk off, and be like, "It'll come." And I think that thing, it's extremely frustrating. He never ever touched my clay or helped me, but I think that was the biggest thing he did for me. That when I got into situations where I was frustrated, I was able to get out of it because he's put me in that situation where I learned to just go through it, just trudge through it, somehow make it through. And it was always like that. Wherever I was frustrated, he would just smile and laugh or walk away and let me struggle. And I think it really helped me.
I love that. Shaping Nation, sometimes you need to struggle. You need to figure it out for yourself because it's not going to be always somebody to help you out. So you have to
Yeah.
figure it out yourself so you continue growing as a potter. I love that. So now let's talk about your pottery. Can you tell me the story how you started making the wood-fired theme pottery that you make today?
Okay, so that's very interesting. So as I said, I moved from, this is a little long story, so bear with me. Well, when I moved from Callenwald, like Atlanta to Austin, I was left with a home studio setting where I could just have a Cone 6 electric kiln, and I had no access to reduction firing. I thought, how bad can it be, right? I'll mix a few glazes, make my pots, dip it in, it'll be fine. And I had my recipes, mix my glazes, and they came out really flat and boring. Now, this is something I had not prepared for because I was used to the warm colors of the reduction firing, and suddenly these cool blues, which were not moving at all, were just depressing. So I took a little time off and tried to figure out things long so basically it was a whole decade of struggling through getting to make pieces that started resonating with me. So at a point I remember I don't know if you've seen my original earlier work, but I used to carve a lot. It was very Indian inspired. It was really heavily carved and intricately carved. So my wood how I transitioned to wood firing was I started noticing that, like, I think the first decade of 20 like 2000s, like 2000 to 2010, all my work, even though it got warmer with the change of clay body and glazes, it was very carved, and I enjoyed the process, but I noticed that I was only collecting and buying pieces which were wood fired and, really warm looking, and I was making these intricately carved pieces. So in 2015, we chanced to go to Taiwan for a week. And I remember I had made some pots and I thought I'll come back and carve them. I go there and I see all the wood fired work in Taiwan, and I'm completely rebooted. Literally, like, I look at my pieces and I'm like, I cannot do this again. I can't carve again. And that led me into, I said, I need to make this stuff that I love in my kiln, and that led to another journey. So 2015 up until now, I've been just working with trying to create a vocabulary of how I can create that work that I so love in my electric kiln. So that's how I got into trying to, I mean, it's not a wood fired look, but trying to get a more rustic look in my electric kiln.
What were you feeling when you rediscovered your love for wood-fired look?
I mean, so the love was always there, and I didn't realize it. I noticed that if I look at all my collection, it's from different artists, it's all wood fired. So the love was always there. It was just I wanted to make it myself, and I was it was very frustrating to begin with because it's very hard to create that look. But there was certain, and I saw some artists on the way, met people who inspired me. Mitch Iberg is one person whose work really inspired me and gave me pointers as to what I could do to try to do this in my electrical. And that initial frustration led to a lot of experimentation, intense experimentation, and then after a lot of failures, a few successes, and that was like started giving me a hope for the future, like, and a little more successes. And then since then, I've been really excited. Like now, I don't feel that I miss not having an opportunity to wood fire because I feel I'm able to get a lot of stuff out which excites me in an electric kiln.
I absolutely love that. That was such a great story. So, you are inspired by the color and texture of nature. Can you tell
Yes.
me more about this?
So again, if you look at pieces which are wood fired, are just some of them look as if they're literally dug from the ground. Some of them look as if they were just, it's just a rock lying there. So honestly, my favorite piece to eat out of would be a rock hollowed out, and if I could eat out of it, that would be. So that is what inspires me. I want to make pieces that look like rocks, which look like, you know, algae is on it. I don't know. It's stuff like this really inspires me, and that's what I'm trying to translate into the surface of my work. Not on site. I'm a functional potter. I want everything to be dishwasher safe and to be you could eat out of it and all that, but the surface is what I play with, and then I try to get the look that I see in nature. So I collect a lot of rocks. I take a lot of pictures of things I see. If I see lichen on the tree, so that starts inspiring me. And I'm like, how can I create this surface on my pot? So yeah,
So, what does that process look like of taking a rock you see outside and then
yeah.
apply it to your pottery?
So the rock is just going to be my inspiration. Then I would try and see. So, for example, the last series I did was I was trying to get these pieces, my cups, to look like as if there was this, you have these rocks near waterfall, which is they're wet and they have algae on it. So I was trying to get that look. It was so it's a multi-firing process. So I would build a surface with slip, then I would add a reactive glaze that would blister and bubble. I would I would grind those bubbles down, add some clear glaze, and over a period of few firings, get to that look. So, it's not like I take the rock and that rock, if I crush it and put it on my piece, it becomes the same color because the color changes in firing. So I am using the texture, but I'm introducing color even through glazes to make it look the way I want. So not really just translating the whole rock into the piece, but using elements of it for inspiration to create that in my piece.
How many times are you firing until you get the final result?
I mean, typically, ideally, one fire, like, bisque and then glaze firing is what I want to do. But sometimes it ends up being three, four times. Well, I'm adding one more layer, one more layer. So sometimes it gets to, especially the cups, where I'm really experimental about my cups. So it gets to be three, four times.
How did you figure out that you needed to fire maybe one or two more times to get the look you wanted?
So sometimes, you know, how pieces come out, they're really bland. I'm like, there's no color. I need to add, or maybe sometimes they come out with this blister that I then grind down. I'm like, how can I heal this blister? Then I would add that little glaze to it, maybe add, and when I'm working, when you have already have a fired piece, it's hard to put glaze on. So I'll just use a hair dryer or a heat gun to heat that spot so that it's able to take glaze again, you know, and then the glaze kind of sits there, then I put it in the firing again. And if it's better, if I'm not satisfied, then I build a little more layer. So,
I love that. Shaping Nation, sometimes you have to keep pushing just a little bit more to find that look you want. It's not going to happen right away sometimes. Sometimes you have to take one or two more times. I love that. So, something from your website that I found interesting is you said, as I mature as a potter, I find myself being drawn to Japanese aesthetic of wabi sabi. Can you tell me more about this?
so yes, when I started my journey, I was like, I'm going to make perfectly symmetrical, amazingly smooth, clean pots. And I remember having this conversation with my teacher. He's like, yeah, wait till you get there and you'll start altering it. I'm like, no, 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 not me. I am going to be doing this. And it sure happened that as I mature, I'm able to see that beauty and imperfection. Like I'm looking for the flaws. I'm looking for the, no, I'm not saying flaws, but those, like when I make a slab and there are these wrinkles in the slab. I love that. I'm not trying to smooth that anymore. I am keeping that in my building process. So using all the natural stuff that happens to clay when I just slam my clay, the way it lays itself down, I am using that to make my crater bowls, you know, trying to make natural stuff and trying to be more organic when I handle my clay itself.
I love that. So, let's talk about the business side of pottery. Can you tell me about the moment when you decided to go full time with your pottery?
Again, I had never had the intention of making this. It was never intended as a business. I had wanted to stay home with my kids, be there and do this as a hobby. It just went out of control. Honestly, it was never an intended thing, but I just had so much fun doing it that the number of hours I put in just increased. And then as my kids were younger, of course, I couldn't put in that much time. As they grew older and they were in school, my time became more full time. I started doing more shows. And last year, our younger one went to college. And I think since then, I've opened myself up to really traveling and doing workshops and things like that. So I would say I had never intended it. It just morphed into a career organically without intention.
What were you feeling when you were able to become a full time potter?
I think, you know, I just feel so blessed that I get to do this all day and call it work. I mean, what else can I ask for? So I think I feel very blessed that I'm able to do this full time.
What would you say helped you the most with being able to sell your pottery?
I think, okay, so my work is more, I don't do, it's more niche. Like, as in, I notice that my work is more appreciated by people who understand ceramics as opposed to the common population. So I started doing art shows, but very quickly realized that this is not my market. And for me, it became more of doing more ceramic only shows. That's where I did much better because the people who really come out to really appreciate my work is are other ceramic people, people who have at least some understanding of or have experienced ceramics. They really get it. And so I have kind of tailored my work towards doing shows which are primarily geared towards ceramics and not really trying to cater to the wider audience, but just to a more niche audience. And that has been helpful.
I love that advice. Shaping Nation, know your market so you could make for that market. That way you'll be able to sell your pottery easier. I love that. Now, what advice would you give to someone looking to start selling their own pottery?
I think I'm the worst person for that. But but you know, initially the advice I was given by another potter was that the first few years could be hard. Like it's not necessary, like not everyone takes off, but sometimes you just have to slowly, it takes time for people to understand your work. Maybe they'll come for the first time and they'll just get familiar with it. They'll see it. They might take a few years. So it might take a few years to really get yourself selling your work well. And he told me like 5 years at least before he could really himself see, profits happening from his work. So, and I think I would agree with that. Like 5 years of consistently going to that same show, and suddenly, people who had been coming and seeing my work now, they're like, yes, now this work is really familiar, and I can see that you are here. Also, they want to see that you're not just a shooting star, right? You have not, oh, one day they are here. There's a consistent body of work that's growing, that's the person has a vision. And so that really helps slowly build you up and be able to sell your work to your market.
I love that. Shape Nation, take time. It's going to take time to be able to sell your pottery, but also continue developing your own voice because that's how you're going to be able to keep selling your pottery. I love that. So let's talk about discovering your voice. Can you tell me about the moment when you knew you were heading in the right direction with your pottery?
So, again, because my work transitioned so much from where I started. When I started, again, I was doing all these carved surfaces, and at that time, I felt I had a voice because it's very distinct, and I felt very comfortable doing what I was doing. But until I felt like, okay, I'm bored or I need to move on. So, but personally, because I've always enjoyed what I did at any time, given time, I never felt that I didn't have a voice because I was just letting myself, it was like clay was a medium for me to express myself. So yeah, right now I know people know my work as someone who does surface variation in electric kiln, and that's great. But I don't know, 10 years later I would probably be doing something else, like maybe painting on my work, and I don't know where it'll take me. But I feel as long as I'm really having fun, and that the energy that or joy I'm putting in while making my work, the audience, the people are able to see it. And I noticed that when I lost interest in carving and I was still making carved work, I could see the sales going down because my interest wasn't there. The energy was not there in the piece, and the people could feel it. So it's I think, again, I it just comes down to, if you love it, it'll come out in your own way.
Absolutely agree. So you contribute your growth as an artist to being isolated in your home studio and relying heavily on experimentation. Can you tell me more about this?
So the isolation was not really, it was self-imposed in a sense. I wouldn't have chosen to do it, but because, as I said, I was raising kids and, I was in a situation, so I was forced to be on my own. And when I didn't have anyone to ask questions of or to be inspired of. I was in a two-car garage with no light, no external sunlight. I was like in there for hours. But I think that really helped me because anytime I had a question, I didn't have anyone to answer. So and no one to say that, oh, that won't work. So I would be like, what if I do this or this? And the only way I could get the answer was trying it. So with the result, I learned to push boundaries, as opposed to if I would have asked someone, and if someone would have told me that, oh, you know what, that might not work. I would have taken that and probably not really pushed myself to try this. And of course, I made a bunch of trash in the process. And I mean, it could have probably helped my journey be faster if I had some advice, but it made me free to really try because I knew nothing. I had no idea going in what to expect. So I tried everything. And in those 100 things I tried, maybe 90 failed, but the 10 were great enough to take me to the next stage of my journey. So I really feel that not knowing much and being isolated helped me in that.
I love that. And I definitely agree. I felt the same thing when I had to experiment so much with learning how to throw on the wheel. And once I found it, I was able to push my pottery to the next level. I definitely agree about that. So, something a lot of potters struggle with is finding time to experiment while also trying to sell their own pottery. How are you able to do this today?
So here I would say, honestly, I have the privilege. I feel I'm blessed and lucky that I don't have to pay my bills with ceramics, right? I have a partner who is, takes care. And so I think it's I remember there was a time when I was making a series of mugs called the Happy Mugs, and that was one of the only times I made something which was completely accessible to and anyone could understand. It was just stick figure mugs with, a person playing a guitar or whatever. It was like everyone loved it. And I had fun making it, and they sold like hotcakes, right? But I remember in about a year I was done. Now and I was like, and when people approached me that, would you, can you make this or can you make that? I'm like, no, I'm done. Now, because I had the freedom, because I was not having to pay my bills, this was not, I could get rid of that and move on and say, I'm not one doing this. If that would have been my bread and butter, I guess it would have been harder. So I'm not able to give an advice in that matter because my situation is I can clearly see the privilege I have to say that, oh, I don't want to make this anymore and I'll move on. And if even if this doesn't sell, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
So now, what advice would you give to someone looking to discover their own unique voice with their pottery?
I guess keep playing and then keep playing and pursue what you feel in that part you really enjoy and just go into a rabbit hole and enjoy that. Like if you say, if I love making brush marks on my pieces, go for it. Just explore it till you find where your joy. So follow your joy. It'll take you to your voice.
Absolutely agree. Shape Nation, follow your joy, and that's where your voice will be. Shikha, it has been very great chatting today, and as we're coming to a close here, what is one thing you want to hammer home with my audience today?
Keep having fun. That's all. Just keep having fun.
Excellent last parting words of advice. Shikha, where can my audience go and learn more about you?
My Instagram is the handle is at Pottery by Shikha, Pottery BYSHIKHA, and that's a great place to connect with me.